Alright, hey everybody, I'm John Lamberton, and I have a sort of fun, silly, mildly absurd presentation for you today, and it's going to be part of a series I am calling Music of Arbitrary Scale, and this will be exploring sort of biological rhythms and various cycles of any sort, ranging from the macroscopic to the microscopic. And today's presentation is going to be on the music of menstruation. All right, so first of all, I'm not talking about mensuration or a menstrual canon, also known as a prolation canon or proportional canon. If you are a freshman music history student, then you will certainly hear somebody joking around, menstrual canon, yeah. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about menstruation, as in the 28-day cycle that many women are familiar with. So let's get into it. You thought this was going to be about music, and it arguably is. It's just of a macroscopic scale, or infradian. So infradian is basically anything over 24 hours. And so in this case, we're basically dealing with time, periodicity, and it's called a period for a reason. Oscillation, waveform, frequency, phase. And to me, these all seem like fundamental sort of musical substrates. So we're going to treat it as music, or view it through a musical lens at least. So here's a graph of a typical 28-day cycle. I got this graph from helloclue.com, this article by Lori Ray, and it basically sort of discusses the timeline of menstruation. And so you can see over here on the left, this red sort of semicircle with the small circles coming off of it is the actual menstruation part. And these various colored curves are various hormonal developments that are in rhythm with this overall cycle. And you'll see here smack dab in the middle is a dividing line, and that is the ovulation range. And so I thought that this looked pretty sinusoidal, and it's almost as if I was like on the Wikipedia for some sort of time series thing, or like signal processing, or Fourier transforms or something, and I just took a wrong turn. But let's hear how this sounds. All right, this is the waveform here. Can you not hear it? Okay. Let's see here. So maybe it's just too low of a frequency. So still can't hear it. Well, let's go up an octave. So we will make it go twice as fast. That is what an octave is. Now we have a 14-day cycle. Here's a visual of that. So we got two cycles within the same larger fundamental cycle. Still can't hear it, huh? Well, maybe we have to go a few more octaves up. So we have 4 cycles per fundamental. And this idea of, sort of like multiplying by 2, multiplying that by 2, you could also just keep on multiplying by integers. So maybe you have, the fundamental, then you have twice the fundamental, or three times, 4 times 5, whatever. That's the harmonic series. And so you can either sort of ascend in octaves, or in the harmonic series, we'll look at a little bit of both. But still can't hear it, can you? Okay, so maybe what we have to do is like 30 octaves. So here's sort of something that gestures at what that would look like. So you have these little microscopic, sub periods, if you will. And yeah, copying and pasting this was a pain in the ass. So enjoy it in all its glory. So why are you not hearing the pitch until we go a full 30 octaves or so up? It's because as humans, for us, like the range that we hear pitches in is generally between 20 hertz and 20,000 hertz. And this kind of, you can compare this to the visual, sensory field, where humans tend to have a certain range of colors. Various other animals will have access to different colors, like maybe like radiation or electromagnetic waves, which would be at a different frequency. And so just like that, with pitches, we have a threshold for what is audible to us. And when you go below this 20 hertz, if you dip down, basically once you get down to 1 hertz, then that's 1 cycle per second, 1 hertz, I guess. So below that, you start to get into this realm where it's sort of closer to, rhythmic impulses. But if we were to treat the 28-day menstrual cycle as a pitch and put it in terms of hertz, cycles per second, that'd be ridiculous. But bear with me here. We got 28 days, 24 hours for each of those days. 60 minutes per each of those hours, 60 seconds for each of those minutes. So that's 419,200 seconds. 2,419,200 seconds. So as a pitch, that would be basically, you can't say how many cycles per second because it would be a very, very, very small, amount of the cycle. So in this case, it's 0 with, a decimal, then 6 zeros, and 4,1335978 hertz. This is obviously ridiculous, and nobody would talk about a menstrual cycle in terms of hertz, but it is a frequency, it's a wavelength. So this is just meant to illustrate that at the end of the day, we're dealing with time and cycles and periods and that type of thing. So, we can treat it as rhythm. We can treat it as, something vibratory, etc. So, to put this through another lens, basically, if you just go 26 octaves up from that, and you have 2.7 cycles per second, 27.7 hertz, and that would be a very low A. That's just a little bit over that bottom of the human register that we can hear. Go a few more octaves up to the 30 that we talked about earlier, and you have 443.8 hertz. So this is, to put it in perspective, compared to like, your standard orchestra, when they come out and start tuning, that is to an A440. So it's just a little bit sharp. So ladies, if you stick with that straight, 28-day cycle, you're a little bit sharper than an orchestra tuning. But at the same time, that's a complicated sort of man-made thing that is a little bit ridiculous, and so, neither here nor there. If we think of a slightly slower scale, which would be like the rhythmic pulse or the tempo, you could talk about this in terms of like, seconds or milliseconds for the duration, or you can talk about it as a tempo, which is also basically a frequency. It's the number of beats per minute. So instead of hertz, which is cycles per second, it's beats per minute. So, typically those would be like 150 beats per minute. That's like, a tempo that we would think about. So here, to put it in those terms, would be 0 point, and then 4 zeros, 248015873. Again, makes no sense to talk about, but you can see it's a slightly larger number than the other one that had like 6 zeros after the decimal. And that's because we're talking in terms of minute instead of second cycle. So let's take a step back real quick. This is all kind of ridiculous. Lots of temporal shenanigans here. So let's talk about the octave real quick. So what is an octave? It's just doing something twice as fast, basically. So if you have that A440, then you go an octave higher, it's 880 cycles per second. So then on that same token, what is 2 octaves above a 28-day fundamental wavelength? Yep, 7-day weekly cycle. So in thinking about this, I was like, that's a very nice way to come to the week, but why do we have weeks anyway? And so I looked this up briefly, and there's some sort of BS about the Babylonians observing 7 planets or something. And this reminded me of Milton Babbitt in this very wordy essay of his, sort of scoffing at the similar interest in trying to describe the septatonic scale, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, in terms of planetary derivation or whatever, which is obviously ridiculous. Now, I have an alternative, which is to see the weekly cycle, the 7-day cycle that we, all follow along with, as the 4th partial of a menstrual series, or sorry, a menstrual cycle. So you have this sort of menstrual harmonic series, or menstrual partials, and this is equally kind of pseudoscientific, but it's a little bit more fun and, dare I say, feminist. So anyway, when we have this 7, it's also worth noting that 7 is prime, and we'll talk more about sort of prime numbers in biological time later, but in a different video. But if you get the 7th partial, to sort of relate this to our sense of chromatic, sort of Western, equal temperament, like you would have on a piano, which is this logarithmic tuning. It's basically somewhere between our minor 7th, or dominant 7th, sometimes you might call it, and the major 6th. So in terms of sets, that's 0 to 10 for the minor 7th, or 0 to 9 for the major 6th. So it's somewhere between that. And it might sound kind of like a blue note to many people, but It's actually more resonant because of its sort of simple integer relation. So to get a little bit of a flavor for this, check out music that's in septimal tunings, or that uses septimal intervals, or 7-limit. And you could hear that in basically like Scottish Highland bagpipe music or barbershop quartets. There's this thing that they do called a ringing chord, where you make sort of a small intonation adjustment, and you can do this as a vocalist because you can sort of have this blend around the pitches instead of, like a piano where it's a fixed pitch. And so you can adjust to one another and create this very resonant, sort of rich and crisp, or they describe it as extra sweet, very barbershop quartet-y thing, sweet ringing chords. So you might also hear it in Terry Riley's music. He would be sort of jamming out in this like minimalist mixolydian, big texture, and then you hear this like kind of like nasal, flat-sounding tone, and that is the 7th partial. You could also check out Lou Harrison or Harry Parch. Both sort of did these microtonal or sort of more integer-related tunings, and very interesting stuff to check out. So what would 2 octaves above the monthly cycle be as opposed to the menstrual cycle? And it's kind of a trick question because the month shifts from month to month. You have a 28-day a month, you have 31, you have 30, you got a 29 thrown in there every once in a while to just complicate things further. So to take the average month length, which is 30 days and change, it gives you a 4th partial of 7.6 days. So where is my nice resonant integer? Basically, it seems to me that months and years play fine, because you have 12 months, whatever, but menstrual cycles also play fine with years, but weeks play fine with years. Weeks don't really play that well with months, though. You get this fractional sort of like fragmenting, where if you look at the calendar for any month, it might just start right in the middle of the week. Like there's this sort of tiling and shifting nature to the month and the week, where it lines up at the end of a year, but it's kind of a complicated metrical structure, and if we think of it as basically like meters that are in a sequence for the larger cycle, which is the year, sure, that works. It's like you have measures, like it's progressing from these different time signatures that are in a sequence that's ultimately indexing the larger cycle, but it's complicated, and like for me at least, I'm sort of ridiculous in this respect. I almost have no interest in how many days are in each month. I know that there are 28 in February and I guess 31 in October. But even with the like knuckle trick of like 31, 30, stupid. I don't care. Like it's ridiculous. It's this like sort of man-made thing that is, I think, inelegant and whatever. Like it doesn't have the same periodicity. It doesn't involve phase whatsoever. So anyway, if we think about menstrual cycles in contrast, different women have different menstrual cycles. So it's not like you get this perfect alignment, and you bring phase into account for this. Like the menstrual cycle is its own sort of endogenous physical thing that has its own rhythm, and we can talk about a year in terms of it, or we can talk about menstrual cycles in terms of a year, but it's not this strict thing. It's this dynamic, sort of complex cycle where, if you have multiple menstruating agents in the world, they will entrain to each other. And so I think this is really interesting, and to put it in sort of like a systems framework, for those of you that are familiar with like the Cynefin framework of Dave Snowden, I would say that the month is a complicated time structure, while menstruation is complex and adaptive. And I genuinely think that complex things in this model are, a little bit more inherently beautiful and can do a little bit more. But the month is just kind of like this. If you were to treat the monthly time structure as a metrical structure for a song and hand it off to anybody, like, good luck getting them to play it. So sure, when we slow it down to the yearly cycle, those rhythms aren't that hard. It's not that hard to count to 31. But if we were to think of it on a more microscopic scale, these rhythms would get complicated and people would start fucking them up because people don't do time signatures that well. So anyway, here we have what I'm calling the 12 against 3 Gregoro-menstrual circannual groove. So on the left here, this 31 and then 28, 31, 30. This is the 12 months, and you can see that there's a shifting quality to them. From afar, you can barely tell the difference. So if you were taking, if you are looking at the scale of a year, that, a few days difference between month to month doesn't seem that big of a deal. It's still generally like 12 chunks of about this size. However, if you do the 28-day cycle for a year, then you get, 13 cycles. And so 12 against 13 is this kind of like uber complicated polyrhythm that's, very close there. But I would say that there's something to this 13 versus 12 thing. 13 is prime, cool, but people are also superstitious about it, with the 13th floor and all that. As a rhythmic meter, it's angular, it's kind of like complicated. You can't just like tell somebody to like play in 13 and have them be able to execute that. 12, on the other hand, what I think is interesting about it is that it's a compound meter. It's a blend of 3 and 4, essentially, or 2 and 6, or whatever. You can combine these things to have a reduced conception of it. So if you tell somebody, eat your goddamn spinach, and do that in rhythm, like, eat your goddamn spinach, eat your goddamn spinach. That's a 3 against 4 polyrhythm. You are in polyrhythmic territory already. It's that easy to have this compound blend. So 13, on the other hand, complicated. People don't want to play in 13. It's asymmetric, it's complicated, whatever, but the primeness of it is kind of interesting, or primacy, I suppose, numerical primacy. So let's think about the annual cycle. We have a year. If you divide it into 12, that gives you basically a pitch that is up 2 octaves and a perfect fifth, I think. Yes, so anyway, this could be reduced kind of like a trimester and a quarter, I guess, coming together to create this common unit of the month. That would be 1/12. To divide a year into 13 would give us this 13th partial, which is new information. It's not redundant like the 12. The 12 is essentially telling us that there was a 4 and a 3 involved. 13 is a new thing. So let's listen to what that sounds like as a pitch, or sort of like what these partials sound like. All right, so again, here's a visual representation of this. You got 4 on the left, 3 on the right. They come together to make this lowest common denominator 12, and that's distinct from this 13 here. So enough with these red pineapple slices. Let's get back to it. If we think about the menstrual sort of weekly harmonics, if you take a 28-day cycle, it has some nice numbers for harmony if we move them to the scale of tones or pitches. So you could have, essentially, if you have the 28-day cycle, split that into 2, you have 14. Split that into 2, you have 7. Or you can divide it by 7 and get 4. And so let's just hear some of that harmony real quick. This would put you in the sort of like bagpipey territory of septimal tuning, but also we can treat it like rhythm. So here you see these 28-day segments, and this little red pineapple on the left. One of the 28 days is split into 7 groups of 4, while the one on the right has 4 groups of 7. So I guess you could say that the one on the right is like 4 weeks makes the menstrual cycle, but then what if we, sort of pace our lives around 4-day cycles? There's no reason that we can't. Society follows the week, but this is kind of, I am describing it as like a menstrual week. So this would be, a menstrual cycle in 7 segments, the way that there are 7 days per week. And so each day in this case would be 4 days long. But, it's kind of interesting. Like if you think of the start of your, I guess the Monday of your week as the bleeding, I feel like that might resonate with a lot of workers out there these days. So anyway, just kind of a fun way to view it. And 7 against 4 is a great polyrhythm. Since we so often think of things in terms of 4-bar phrases. It's really easy. You just have 4 bars of 7. But if we flip that upside down, so you have a different dominant pulse, then you could have 7 groups of 4, and that is ultimately the same larger scale structure of time, but it gives you a different sort of sense of pace. And so let's listen to an example of that real quick. And 7 groups of 4. All right, so in thinking about this and sort of just reflecting on it, I began thinking that, this cycle that we were looking at earlier, that colorful graph, in a way you could sort of like see that as the year, and it's almost as if like that ovulation splits into half, and then you have these almost quarter segments. So it's like, what else is a 4-part segment? You have the semester, you have seasonality, and the phases of seasonality. Basically, then I thought maybe this could be a sort of macromenstruation, where the actual menstruation part of it is, I guess, autumn, and the proliferative is winter, and then maybe there's a point in spring that is ovulation, and then the summer is like this whole secretory cycle, but it doesn't line up perfectly. So see here, autumn, winter, spring, summer. Basically, this part here on the left, the period with these little like red circular things, it's just a tad bit before the quarter mark. 7 would be the end of the first quarter. Like the second quarter would start on day 8, if we're adhering to a crisp 28-day cycle. So you can see that it's kind of just a bit before a quarter. And so we think of seasons as 3-month periods, basically. But what if there's actually this, thing that breaks the 4-ness of it all and puts it more into 13-ness? Because 4-ness plays well with 12. So if we think of the year as 12 segments, sure, you can get 4 segments, but I don't know. There's something about the period where there's this thing smack dab in the middle, but then like something a little bit before a quarter. It makes me think of 13, because maybe then it's essentially like 3, 3, 3, and an extra 1. Like maybe there's some sort of asymmetry there, and so thinking of it as like a sort of macromenstruation is fun, and it follows a similar contour, and maybe that is a sort of progression of phases that we see in other aspects of the world. So in this graph here, you can see that there are these little colored bars. The top set of bars is dividing this into 13, the bottom into 12. And I know this is sort of imperfect because of these white bars that separate it, but you can see that it sort of plays nicely with both 12 and 13. And just because you involve 13s doesn't mean that you can't involve 12s. It just means that it's this sort of large macrostructure. But if we start considering the year in terms of like 12 and or 13, then you can get this alignment like you see here at the end of the actual menstruation portion of this, the little red semicircle. It sort of rounds off there at the end of the 3rd menstrual cycle. And these little hormonal curves with the colored lines, that goes off right before the half point, but the half point lines up with both that center of the 13 as well as the dividing line that would put 6 and 6. So this is a little bit like, ridiculous, and I don't know that anybody else is saying that the seasons of the year are macromenstruation, but I think that's an interesting way to ponder it. And at the end of the day, again, we're just talking about time, cycles, phases, all this type of stuff. So I don't know, I'm going to leave you with this image and a little groove of 12 against 13, so you can hear this sort of lilting hiccup of a groove. And I have a few more audio files of this that you can get on my Patreon, where there's a lot more content available and a lot more in-depth stuff. So here I will leave you just with this visual and the groove of 12 against 13. So I hope you enjoyed this presentation. Thanks for tuning in. Stay tuned for the circadian rhythm one, the circannual rhythm one, or annual rhythm, as well as ultradian, and what else? We'll probably get into like stock rhythms and business cycles as music and all that. So I hope that you enjoyed this. Thanks for tuning in. Talk to you later. Bye.